Hi. So thank you so much again for your time. I'm so excited to get to talk to you. Vanessa here with Multiverse of Color. The Hybrid is so heavy, but it's such a great read, and it was actually pretty easy to get through. But at the same time, I was like flipping back and like rereading pages while I was going forward and backwards. Just an incredible book, just gorgeous to look at. So just incredible work. I just wanted to say that up front.
Wow,
Yeah,
thank you.
no
Thank
problem.
you. I put Anakin behind me. He's normally not there because I thought it would be appropriate for this conversation. Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah,
Honestly, yeah, I get it.
yeah.
um, let's talk about the art direction because
Okay.
gorgeous. It's really soft and but hard, and like the world building and the details is really really interesting. There's so many little details within the artwork, and I know you were responsible for the art direction. And how did you work with Francesca for your vision specifically for this? And what was the inspiration for the art style?
It's such a great question. I mean, when I first decided to write this, I didn't really. It was during COVID, and I thought it was too esoteric, and I probably wasn't going to make it. And then at some point, someone close to me said, this is encouraged me to maybe start illustrating it. And so I started looking at illustrators, and I just found like a homogeny that what I that there wasn't tons of it wasn't as differentiated or unique as I was hoping of a smorgasbord to find when I was I mean I don't want to be rude because there's so many amazing illustrators that I love, but I knew I wanted to do something a little bit different. And so when I found Francesca, her style and her sensibility was so different than mine. There was only this one little dark little panel on her Instagram. I liked the way that she painted light, but it had a darkness to it. And so when I first approached her, she lives in a small stone town in southern Italy. She said, "No, why would you ask me to do this? I'm completely wrong to do this. This is totally not what I do." And I said, "That's exactly why I want you to do it, because I think that us building a world together, the way you paint light, you using darker colors, I think that combination will create something that maybe people don't see very often or is fresh."
Love it. The
Yeah.
storybook telling, the way it was laid out, it reminded me, not exactly the same, but it reminded me, it like invoked this like book I used to read when I was a kid. The story of the Three Little Pigs, and like that kind of dark story tale, like dark fairy tale kind of vibe. Thought it was really great. But the speaking of like the world building, you the different ethnicities, the beef that they had with each other. What how did you decide to like create those different like factions, those in the way that especially the Latinos were drawn, and their different tattoos? Like, how did you decide those details?
It's a great question. I want to extend my answer to the last question too. Listen, that hybrid is an extension of my real life. I just had a memoir come out called Child X about my very strange childhood
Mm-hmm.
in Los Angeles, and those were my neighborhoods. I grew up in Filipino, Mexican, Cholo,
Mm-hmm.
Armenian, Nicaraguan neighborhoods. So all the characters in the book, I was never going to tell my life story. I kind of started making this thing after COVID, and then put it down, and then eventually decided and made a deal to tell my life story in a real form that I was never going to do. Hybrid was going to be my way of telling my life story without ever telling my life story. So then I started working on this long form literary work, and then my agent said, "I think I have an idea for Hybrid." So and then it sold. So then all of a sudden, um, there's so many scenes in this supernatural book that are directly taken from my memoir, or they're companion pieces. They go together. And but one thing I did want to say, I had it is heavy. The memoir is heavier. They kind of go together. I'll put them up together. Child X and Hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, the when I was a kid, I was taking the bus by myself uh, at 7 years old to Hollywood Boulevard, and in a lot of ways, we live in the east side of Hollywood towards downtown, in tenements that you can't even imagine. You know,
Mm-hmm.
five of us in a room when I did live with my parents, but then when I lived in this kind of orphanage-like environment, we would be stacked, different, it would change, but sometimes we'd be stacked, packed in 3 bunks high in these industrial bunk beds. So most of that is taken directly from my life. But, in a lot of ways, this access to Hollywood Boulevard, where I would either pass out flyers for money, pretend to pass out flyers for money, steal money, get money however I could, $10, 15, and take the bus to Hollywood Boulevard to kind of escape my pain and spend the day at a movie theater watching the same movie over and over again, or going between the theaters. And I feel like art kind of saved me in a way, in the sense that I'm watching all these heroic stories. I fell in love with science fiction. And I kind of kept, whenever I would leave to go back to my horrible circumstances, I kind of wanted to become the hero in my own movie. And I do feel like the only reason I'm here today doing all the things that I do, in April will be 6 books and all the crazy cool things that I get to do in life, that it was those movies that saved my life. And in a lot of ways, Hybrid is my first foray into sci-fi, which is my love, and it made me very nervous because I'm such a fan and have such reverence for it. But probably kind of as an extension of your first question, I think I wanted to make something that would maybe affect people in the way that I was affected as a kid, like make a piece of art that would maybe hit somebody in a very impactful way, that would give them hope, maybe, just be this kind of hopeful, emotional thing. And so I felt that these big double spread images would be cinematic, and maybe would hit people in a kind of more like right in the heart, in a more impactful way. Because like when I look at comic book art or graphic novel art, I got to tell you, I get frustrated by panels. I feel like they break up the work, and sometimes they make this beautiful art too small. And then you have these white bubbles in the middle of this beautiful, beautiful art. And that never made sense to me. Even when I was a little kid and I loved Conan, I would say, why, they're just these white bubbles in the middle of this art. Like, so I wanted to see if I could make a work of art where the art would be uninterrupted and bold.
Awesome. I was actually going to ask you about that. There's like this, I distinctly remember the detail of the kids stacked 3 beds high in the sec home, and the visual of that and Johnny's experience. And I was doing some research, and I saw that you, obviously as a child, were in a Scientology orphanage or military. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, they're the religious clergy of that group, and there are not a lot of Black people in that group, right? Mm-hmm. Which made it even weirder. But the religious clergy of that group that run it is a kind of naval paramilitary organization. And on the day of my birth, my parents turned me over to them, to a slum nursery on the outskirts of downtown Los Angeles, in the Rampart Police District, not far from MacArthur Park, if people know LA. Rampart Police District is probably the most corrupt police district in the history of the United States. I mean, that big scandal in the early aughts, there were Crips and Bloods on the payroll at Rampart. So, I'm growing up, and then MacArthur Park, if people know it, near downtown LA, it's just full of junkies and that was the milieu of my childhood. So I'm getting all of these kind of, fantastical science fiction religious ideas from this cultic experience. But I'm in this soup of immigrants and gangs and drug addiction and alcoholism and poverty and working class people. And so I think in a lot of ways maybe it feels like a gumbo or something, but it was very much a reflection of my experience.
I respect that. Is it hard? Like, man, it's just so heavy, like, to go through as a kid, and like I have not an unsimilar experience. But is it hard for you to? And I'm gonna talk about that in a sec. But is it hard for you to like dip with the Child X and with this book? Is it hard for you to dip back into your past to pull forward stories like this? Because I feel like that could be like re-triggering or re-traumatizing.
It's been, I mean, be honest with you, Vanessa, it's been brutal. I mean, if you read Child X Hybrid is a lighter version of what actually went on. I mean, there's probably 5 near-death experiences below the age of 10 in Child X, which I took a couple out because I didn't want to, I just thought this is getting ridiculous, and I was in an FBI raid, the largest FBI raid in history, when I was 7, because they were raiding their LA compound, that big blue building, and they kept us up all night while agents were flooding into rooms. And I wasn't seeing it was a crucible of suffering that lasted 20 years. I didn't go to school, so I could read at a high level from reading their doctrine at the age of at a young age. But at 20 years old, I could barely write. I couldn't form a sentence. I didn't know how a comma worked. I couldn't do basic math. And what makes my story incredible is when I escaped from that paramilitary group at 20 or 19, I was pretty much semi-literate or functionally illiterate as far as writing and math were concerned. And I ended up getting into, within 5.5 years, I got into and graduated from the London School of Economics, which in Europe is like Harvard. So part of my story is just that incredible arc. And, it's one of the things, one of the reviews of the book, it's interesting that I feel like people really they have a strong opinion on the book. Like they're putting themselves into, well, I love this, but this part. And one of my favorite reviews, the guy said, well, I don't know. Well, there were 2 reviews that kind of really stuck at me because one said, I don't know if you need the magic to tell the story. And you absolutely do need the magic, because I don't think I would have gotten out of it without some magic. And something supernatural and paranormal that was bigger than me. My ability to manifest, maybe it's a metaphor for my curiosity, which saved my life, which was spawned by movies. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, another review that I love, the guy said, I don't know if he proved his point that you can escape. No, the whole point of the book, I mean, I really love this guy's review, is that without magic, I don't escape. Most people don't escape. Most of the kids that I grew up with are not functional or not around anymore for a variety of reasons, addiction, So, I don't want to make it a bummer story. It's a good story. Yeah. It was absolutely brutal. I feel like I went through, just the writing of it was, and I had a person that was very close to me as a kind of thought partner walking me through the book. And it was, traumatic. Yeah. Very traumatic. I mean, I was kind of numb. And I mean, when I did the audio book for Child X, which is a mirror of Hybrid, my body broke down. I ended up in the emergency room, but just because it was like this release. I mean, I don't know how deep you want to go on a comic books podcast or show, but it was like this release of all this physical pain that I had my entire life. Like, in a lot of ways, when to keep it real, I was kind of living a double life. I was so embarrassed and had so much shame about what happened to me that I didn't tell anybody about it. My agents didn't know. My publishers didn't know. When I sold Hybrid, she didn't know about that certain aspects of my past. And I remember later when with Child X, when I decided that I kind of had to do like a walk where I called everyone and told them everything, all these people that are kind of my circle, in my creative circle, there was a call where I was on the phone with the publisher of Street Noise, the brilliant Liz Francis, who's created an incredible, I mean, she only does a few books. She does a few to a medium amount of books a year, but 30% of her books last year got nominated for Eisner Awards. She was just an incredible guide in finalizing the book. And we were on the phone with my agent, and my agent says, everything is Hybrid is true. Because she had read, because we were working on Child X. And I turned and I said, listen, Marianne, I can't levitate. So not everything in it is true.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, but they're very much, I think that art is about the most of something.
Hmm.
And I actually feel like in certain ways, hybrid is just as or more accurate than Child X, because when people want to look at something that's really hard to look at, they need to look at it through the kind of blue, gold, and green of a welder's mask.
Mm.
We need to look at things through a refraction. If we look at pain and death directly, it overwhelms the senses. And even if we're staring at it, we can kind of turn and run in our minds. So hybrid is a way to, you know, get people to look at something that they wouldn't, you know, in a way, you know, to put it in a world of future adjacent science fiction. I feel like in a lot of ways, it's allow, you know, people will accept the reality, you know, in a way that maybe with Child X they believe it,
Hmm.
but they're also kind of simultaneously rejecting it. You know, at one point when the publisher of Child X had said to me, "Hey, would you ever write a book on what happened to you?" And I said, "Probably not." And then he said, "I don't know that you could write a book like that." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because nobody would want to read a book where they watch a kitten get strangled for 300 pages." And then what happened was he said to me, "Are there a lot of black people in Scientology? What's your black history?" I said, "Well, I'm a mixed person, you know, but I'm very, I'm close with my grandmother, and I can trace, on my mother's side, I can trace my um, family back to American slavery.
Hmm.
And what my family accomplished between 1865 and 1940 in terms of business, doctors, both my grandfather and my uncle were Tuskegee Airmen. I mean, this incredible success story, American success story. And then in one generation, the grandson is born a slave. Like, how does that happen? Right.
Hmm.
So, in a lot of ways, hybrid is this kind of euphoric, cathartic expression of what saved me and returned me to life, which was the life saving power of art. Art is the only reason that I exist and survive today, and in that way, it is a, I don't know what the word to use to describe it. It's just me um, taking, it's a cathartic sledgehammer, artistic sledgehammer of, this is what art can do, and this is the beauty. One thing that always bothers me about, kind of like when you see charities on TV, like when I was a kid and Sally Struthers would be helping the people in the famine, or when you see a lot of charities that help poor people,
Hmm.
they almost have to humiliate them to help them.
Hmm.
Like, let's look how pathetic they are. And being in those poor neighborhoods, that was not my experience. My experience is that working class people, and or people that have less, are the ones that are helping each other,
Hmm.
and that the amount of genius that exists in working class, and I'll just call them poor neighborhoods, ghettos, whatever you want to call them, you know, the
Hmm.
tenements that I grew up in, genius is equally dispersed in the world. You're right. We have, you can go to rural Africa, and in a little village in the bush, and in that village will have the exact same amount of genius as you'll find in Munich. The
Yeah.
question is there a way for that genius to access the world? So hybrid is very much about the lost genius that we don't, rather than looking at people that don't have as much and saying, look at how pathetic they are, they're how bad they are, we need to help them. Maybe a different point of view would be, um, there's this massive mine of lost genius that we're ignoring, and that if we mined it, we just might change the course of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so many things that you said I need to follow up on
Okay,
immediately.
all right. I'll be quiet and just answer
No, you're
questions.
fine.
I hope that wasn't too much of like a soliloquy. Okay, okay.
No, I
I hope
love
that
you.
wasn't a monologue. Okay.
No, it's perfect. That makes my job easier. No, you had said something I really wanted to address. Because I actually made a note of this. There is a scene where he's like sleeping on the floor, and it reminded me a little bit of my childhood. I grew up in poverty as well, but I was also raised as Jehovah's Witness, and I know a lot of people compare the two a lot. And magic, supernatural, sci-fi, those are the things like you're talking. I was like, this sounds just like me. Why do kids that grow up in those situations, why is that our escape when it really magic is not supposed to, like in Jehovah's Witness, like magic, witches are like bad things, but that's the thing I was drawn to the most. So why do you think kids that grow up in those circumstances escape in those realms specifically?
God, it's such a great question, and nobody's ever asked me a question like that. But I have a really close friend here. I should introduce you to him. His name is Jelani Memory, and he started a company called A Kid's Book About, an imprint, where you tell kids it's these little kids books where you talk to kids about things you're not supposed to talk to kids about, like war and abortion and trans, all the things that you're not supposed to. And that he just got acquired by Penguin Random House, imprint of Penguin Random House, and he grew up partly JW. So I would say that when we're in these, I do think a lot of it has to do with being in these kind of subgroups, because they're saying, okay, witches, demons, all this stuff is don't go there, but then they're also teaching it to us, right? We're learning about the supernatural, and we're learning about the supernatural. Is such a great question, Vanessa, while our brains are developing. So they're telling me about spaceships, how we're going to travel to spaceships to save other planets, and if I could just suck it up in the orphanage, then I'll get to see my mom again once we move on to the next planet. We're going to go there in a spaceship. I'm 5, and I'm signing a billion-year contract to save the planet at the same age that I believe in the Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, and the Sandman. So I think that if you're telling kids anything supernatural, it could be religiosity, and then I think that they're probably primed, and then they're pressurized by the weight of poverty and culture or religiosity. I mean, I love people of faith. I don't want to. I'm not down on faith. That creates a mind that is ripe for science fiction.
I agree. It's
Yeah.
fair. How did you go from, you said you weren't talking, you were dreading or not telling people like really in your circle what had happened to you as a kid. And I get that. When I don't really like bringing up I was raised by Jehovah's because like people are like always give me a strange look or like sympathy. And I'm like, I don't want or need any of that. How do you go from that to like, I mean, this is now what everyone's going to really know you for. And how do you like, is that something that you just have to like just guard your mind against and like just go through it? Like, I'm curious about how do you go from that.
Man, I mean, God, Vanessa, you're really like, I just thought this was going to be like some softballs. I really did. I would watch your interviews, what couple of your interviews on YouTube, and I was like, oh, this will be easy. She's just going to give me some softballs, right? Yeah, these are wow. Listen, I've been releasing over the last year. It's almost like a steel spring that has been pushed down, for half a century, and then in a year-long, too-long period of writing and releasing, boom, like that. And it's just energy and shame wafting off of me. But I'll tell you what's really interesting about that. It was my publisher at Bambella Books with Child X. And again, Hybrid came first. I probably wouldn't have gone on to do Child X, even though Hybrid sold later, if I hadn't written the story as not as science fiction. But the first thing that Glenn Yeffett said when we were talking about it, the publisher, CEO of Bambella Books, is there's I was telling him what my family accomplished before my life in poverty, and it's incredible, just the crucible of physical stress, chronic head lice, medical neglect, surge. I mean, it's just incredible. Like I don't know how I'm alive. And I get letters from all over. People write me on Instagram all the time, and they congratulate me, and it's kind of like you're feeling like you're being congratulated for not dying, right? Like it's like being in a trench in World War I, and you got your two best friends on each side of here, and you hear a clunk, and you look to the left, and your friend is keeled over, dead. There's a bullet in the center of his helmet, and you hear clunk, and the other friend keels over, and you look, and there's a bullet in the center of his helmet, and then you hear a third clunk, clunk, and your helmet rattles, and you take it off, and you see a hole straight through the middle of it, and you start feeling around, and you're still alive, and then you get to go home. That's what it feels like, and that's what Hybrid represents for me, because that was unsurvivable, and only through art was I able to survive, and mostly in the power of science fiction, and is what saved my life. Really, not just art, but science fiction. And I wanted to, and again, I was very nervous about this book. I've been very, very, because I can't totally see it, and I felt like, we can go a little longer if you want to, because I'm giving you long answers, but I felt like I wanted to make something for the other. This is all about, like, Anakin behind me. I call him Starboy. He's not really Anakin to me. He's Starboy. He's a reminder of my 9-year-old self, kind of like we did it. And Hybrid is, we all have the 9-year-old in us. And I wanted to make something that would make older adults feel their 9-year-old self again, and maybe create that feeling in them that saved me. I don't know if I did it, but that's what probably got me out of bed in the morning to work on something that was innovative and different. But one of the things that Glenn Yeffa said to me is, you should be telling this story in the context of your Black history. And I literally got a feeling of disgust when he said it, because I had these long periods of my life where I was completely disconnected from it. Mm-hmm. My grandmother grew up in the same town as Alex Haley. She was a close friend of his until he died. My Aunt Lucy was one of Alex Haley's best friends. I'll show you something that not a lot of people get to see. Hold on. This is a copy of Roots that Alex Haley gave me.
Oh my God.
When I was a kid. I was very completely disconnected, divorced from that history. But when I escaped this thing at 19, I went to live with my grandmother, who'd grown up in the segregated South. She'd met my grandfather at Meharry Medical School. And he was I didn't have really a lot of connection to the family. I saw them every couple of years for a couple of weeks, and I would normally end up in the hospital because no one was looking at my body. And then I would be dreading the whole time I was there, because I would on the East Coast, because I knew I was going back to the orphanage, which was a hell. Mm-hmm. So I felt very disconnected from it. But I feel like when I left, my grandmother was just shoving my history down my throat. And I felt like it makes me emotional. Like, I felt like if my ancestors, my grandfather, my great-grandfather could do what they did under Jim Crow, then maybe I could fix my illiteracy. Maybe I feel like I was able to connect to something that was much bigger than me and tap into, I'm not very woo after having a very woo childhood. But I do think that I tapped into this ancestral energy that is often marketed in the world as this like pathetic horror, which it was. But for me, it was pure power.
I'm going to give you a softball this time.
Okay.
The,
I mean, I hope I'm not going. I mean, you really did catch me off guard. So I hope I'm giving you. I hope the answers aren't too much. I'm trying to be honest.
you are. This is probably one of the better interviews I've done. I think you're very well spoken and I think this is great. And I want to make sure that I'm not pulling too, like, I don't want to make you uncomfortable with my questions.
No, no, no. I mean, no, in fact,
please.
you know, this is the first, I want to give you a compliment. This is the first graphic novel kind of comic interview where I've ever talked about my past. It's never come up.
Really?
So
really?
yeah. I mean, you know, this book just came out. So, you know, quite honestly, it's, you know, it's an honor to, it should be coming up because it's probably more about a huge reason why Hybrid exists. And I just never thought of it. Will it come up? And so, no, it's good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I did have like a set of questions, and then I looked into you and I was like, oh, I have so many other questions.
Okay. All right.
But why was the story set in the future? It said it was in the future or something like that, but it could have been set at any time. Like, there really isn't that much of a difference between Johnny's reality and what's in our present. And so I was curious about, or is it an alternate reality? I was curious about why you said it that way.
It's a slightly alternate reality. One of the things that's really interesting is when it kind of, during COVID, I kind of sat down and I'm a writer that is very architectural. Writing takes a long time. I plan everything out. Hybrid wasn't really conceived that way. It just kind of was just kind of channeled. And I really, when I got it down, I thought, okay, this is an esoteric work. And it is for 5 guys in Brooklyn in turtlenecks. I'll probably never make it. I sent it to a friend and she said, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear.
Yes.
But she said, what the fuck are you talking about? This is Marvel. And I said, a mulatto Marvel character, you know, like, for lack of a better term. And she said, yeah, that's the world now. And it wasn't until I started to illustrate it that I saw that. But, you know, one of the things that I do is, like, I have this, I call it Greater Angels or Greater Angeles, however you want to pronounce it. And when I called it that, it was just like Greater Los Angeles, you know, it was just practical for me. But really what I'm saying is Greater Angels. Yeah. And I grew up in the shadow of the film industry in Hollywood. I mean, one of the worst place that I lived was this brick building on Melrose, 4 blocks away from Paramount Studios, where some of the greatest movies of the 1970s were made. I was being tortured, never going to school, never learned to brush, animalized. I was treated like a chattel slave. I mean, like, didn't have bed sheets, didn't learn to brush my teeth. 3 bunks 3 high from 3 years old in this military structure. I mean, it was wild. And you know, 4 blocks away from where they're making all these movies that would end up inspiring me, like Chinatown and The Godfather, and, you know, all these movies that are like that are so important to me that I dork out on. And God, what was the question again? I was going somewhere. Yeah, what was
just the setting, and why was it set?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, so it just came, so when I wrote Follyland, which is the alternative name for Hollywood, that was totally practical. I thought, okay, it used to be called Hollywoodland. That went away. I want people to know it's Hollywood, because the land part of the Hollywood sign fell off and I never put it back. So, Follyland. But then as we started to illustrate the book, I thought, oh no, it's got all this symbolism in it that I never intended. And I thought, maybe I'm going to get criticized for, like, trying to shove symbolism down people's throats that I never even thought about. So in that way, Hybrid was different than anything I've ever made. And as I go more into fiction, I have another graphic novel coming out with Street Noise Books,
War Poems?
called War Poems in April. So that's also science fiction. There's a lot of channeling that goes on now that I'm doing more and more creative work, because I've been an artist for a long time, a conceptual artist for a long time, but most of that's been visual. It hasn't been in my writing. and now it's just one after the other. But I think that, like I was saying earlier, people can't look at reality. Why science fiction is so important and so powerful, and how it was able to save my life, is I was not able to look at my reality growing up. One of the things that people say about the book is like, God, we want to know a little bit more about what's going on in Johnny's head.
Mm.
The reality is that Johnny was numb, and Johnny was just observing the world and trying to survive. How am I going to stay alive would have been the only thing going on in Johnny's head, and or Jamie's head. And so I think that people want to see reality through a refraction, and I just wanted to make that. I didn't want to veil it. I wanted that, and I wanted also to celebrate these cultures that made my life. You know, I just went on a mission, to a science medical mission to Armenia. I was there about 6 weeks ago. I grew up in Armenian, like the neighborhoods were literally Armenian, uh, Mexican, Filipino, Nicaraguan, and some black people. Okay. And this incredible soup between East Hollywood and downtown LA that I hated. I hated the neighborhood. I hated the people. I hated the I mean, I just felt it was constantly coming in on me. Like that stuff of the helicopters, you know, rattling outside the window every night, that was real. You know, like our house, my apartment shook every night, and I grew up with gunshots every night. And I resented it and I hated it. And when I got older and I got out of it, I mean, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but I felt very blessed to grow up with all these cultures. Like I used to go to Griffith Park, which is this, you know, the wealthy people of LA don't really use Griffith Park the way that the working class people and the immigrant community in LA uses Griffith Park, which may be the largest city park in the United States. And there was just this Mexican culture there, this car culture of these hydraulic cars, and I'd be, you know, like to be 8 years old, to have nothing, to be deprived of everything, and you see these guys with these tattoos and these cars and the paint jobs doing these things that cars can't do. I just thought cholos, who I was terrified of, were the coolest guys in the world. The way they dressed with their wingtip shoes and their trousers and their shirt open up with the you know, with the tank top, and the way they shaved their heads. Like I just thought they were just, there's nothing cooler than these guys, and they can make, and that's another form of genius. Like these guys are these working class immigrants, and they're making these cars that are like spaceships. And so that just had this incredible power on me as a kid that was not so different than the science fiction movies I was seeing. And so Hybrid is a celebration of these cultures. I mean, I went to this karate school, I'm going on, and called Choi Karate. And they brought in this Filipino a guy that was bringing, he came from the Philippines to do a demonstration of Filipino stick fighting, called arnis. And I got to tell you, what you see, who's the guy, the Darth that's red and black with the face paint?
Darth
Maul. I mean, I got to believe that his whole fighting style and the way that was choreographed was directly taken from Filipino stick fighting. So there's all of these influences going on, these Armenian influences, these Filipino influences, Mexican influences, and this book is supposed to be a kind of thank you for that, because it's what's informed me of how to move through the world. You know, like we have a lot of talk about diversity these days, and a lot of people resenting that it's being shoved down people's throats, and I get that. I don't want it shoved down my throat, but I'm for diversity, just because when things are more diverse, they're just more fucking dope. Everything is just fucking better when you have this people from different backgrounds and different economic, like when that is going into the creative soup, if you see anything that's creative, that is different and better, or something that inspired you or that you liked about Hybrid, that is coming from the voices of those neighborhoods, of that neighborhood in East Hollywood, in the droughts of Los Angeles, showering me with inspiration, showering me with culture, showering me with ideas, and showering me with beauty and community, that isn't talked about enough.
It's incredible. You
Yeah.
have such a great way of like everything you say is so visual. Like I can see it in my head. I think it's a great way to write and to speak. I appreciate it so much. I'm going to give you one last question before we sign off. But like, what are
Okay.
you, including with war poems, if you want to talk a little about that, but what do you got going on next?
Well, war poems, I'm worried about war poems. I was like, what? War poems is, it's basically taking the ugliest people in the world. There's that painting in Hybrid of the Elianos and Felinos at war. So taking this scene of a gang war and turning it into a celebration of beauty, that's been so much of my life, and that's what so much of science fiction is taking conflict and putting it into a context of beauty. So what I've done with war poems, it's really a reflection of the world over the last 2 years. I channeled it. I don't know where they came from. It's not really poems. It's kind of poems, but really it's a series of short episodic stories, some a paragraph, some a couple pages long, that basically outline the most grotesque, disgusting people that we think are the most disgusting people in the world, what we call a so-called terrorist, what we call a sex worker, what we call gang members, what we call murderers, what we call the worst people in the world, and telling through a science fiction lens what is happening from their point of view. Like, what is their point of view while experiencing, while they're committing this thing that disgusts you. And what that does is, no matter what, you're going to be able, it's going to shift your empathy. And when you shift empathy, that opens up the door for love. And so war poems is just a reflection of the world. It's about AI. It's about environmentalism. It's about Gaza. It's just so that's really what's on my mind. And then there is a secret project that I'm developing art for. But I don't quite want to talk about it yet because the art isn't working quite yet. It's close, and so I don't want to jinx it. But I'm working on something that's, I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm always, yeah. But Or Poems, I think, and again, I want to applaud Liz Francis, the publisher of Street Noise Books, for just her bravery. When I was writing war poems, I kind of started writing it because I couldn't get some approvals for Child X on these songs I wanted to use. So I just wrote my own poems, and then I kept writing them. And I told Liz Francis about it at Street Noise Books, and she said, "Can you send those to me?" Okay, what would you do with that graphically? So, she was really the inspiration. And I just said, there were times where I just thought, Liz, maybe this is just too much. and she was like, oh no, let's do it. Right. So I just have to tip my hat to her courage. That woman is fearless. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. This has been incredible. I love talking to you about this and everything. And for every kid that's grown up in an unfortunate and shitty and terrifying situation, I think this is going to be something that will really resonate with people, especially even if they're not even people that haven't gone through that. Like, I think it's going to speak to people in a very specific way. So I appreciate you even doing this.
Can I have one last word? Because you just inspired me to say something.
Yeah, of course.
People ask me, why, and again, I don't believe in a meritocracy. I do think that there was a little bit of magic, maybe the ancestors. So, when people criticize that aspect of the book, I'm like, what are you talking about? That's true. That magic probably is manifestation that comes from extreme curiosity. But what Hybrid is ultimately about, but it's also true that what as an expression of science fiction, what this is about in a way is that you can be in the deepest, darkest hole of humanity where there is no coming back, and you can still come back. And I think there's no better way to share that with the world in a pop kaleidoscope of color than through science fiction.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And then Instagram, if you like what I said, follow me on Instagram. And I always talk to people, so send me a note, Jamie, JAMIE_mustard, MUSTARD on Insta. Reach out if you'd like to talk about the work.
Absolutely. Thank you.